Okay, on the Mark Tribe, if you've listened for any amount of time, you've heard me talk about picking low-hanging fruits. And the lowest hanging fruit is with the shortest club most times in the bag, and I have an expert on the line with us to help us out. There's James Jankowski. James, how are you, man? Welcome to our show.
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Mark?
I'm great. I love to talk about putting. I'm a swing instructor deep down. I know just enough about putting to kind of be dangerous some. So whenever I get in the company of guys like yourself, having worked with countless professionals around the world, I'm all ears. So I want to dive in, but before we go there, let's put you in context. Tell our global audience a bit about you, please.
Yeah, so I guess I've been playing golf since maybe 12 years old, so fairly late starter.
All right.
And then as I've grown to love the game, tried to play as a professional, um, had a couple of years playing mini tours and stuff like that.
All right.
Was always a good putter, and then playing didn't work out, so went down the PGA route, did my qualification there.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the back end of that, having finished my qualification, I was kind of at a crossroads of what to do. I started out actually in strength and conditioning.
All right.
Got my qualifications there, but then went down a different route. And actually, just because I was a good putter, started helping a couple of friends. And saw some decent results. So then started helping a few more people, and then started, kind of getting into it more, buying software, improving my understanding. And that was about 8 years ago, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been doing putting ever since. And now it's just, crazy, really busy, coaching some pros.
Yeah.
Worked with one or two from main tour and PGA tour, and it's great.
Hey, I want to ask you a couple philosophical questions. First off, people will hear it said that, great putters are born. You can't make yourself a good putter. Now, I take great offense to that observation.
Yeah,
You have got a wonderful way I've looked at what you do of blending the art of putting with the science of putting.
yeah.
What is your take on that observation that a lot of folks have? They're like, no, I can't putt. That's just who I'm supposed to be for the rest of my life.
I think, well, certainly what I do. I mean, I coach a lot of good players, but I also coach a lot of club golfers and of every level.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no doubt that people can get better at putting.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's from poor understanding of the right concepts, or just understanding how they individually can get better at putting, rather than kind of looking at videos online and that sort of thing to try and figure it out that way. Sometimes just understanding your own game and what can make you better is how to get better.
You know what I find fascinating, and that's why I appreciate guys like yourself who have picked putting as a genre to focus on, and that's all you do, because
Yeah,
most instructors that kind of dabble in every department of the game. Well, you into fitting, which is very important. We'll talk about that, getting the right style putter for your stroke. But what I sort of find people do as well is they'll happily go and take a lesson for their full swing and then make one other change there. But as it pertains to putting, they just will get on the green and sort of swing the blade and kind of hope. Am I wrong in my assessments here, or as you see it?
yeah. I think going for a putting lesson is something that club golfers do, far less frequently
Mm-hmm.
than they do. It seems to be most club golfers have lessons on their swings and not many on the putting, and that I think that's because they think, I'm on the green, it's a small movement, small motion, and it's kind of easy. And they're not, maybe like you said earlier, the low hanging fruit of putting. Sometimes you hold four more putts in a round of golf, well, that's four shots taken off your score.
Yeah,
Whereas you hit the ball 10 yards further. How do you then compute that to your score? It's difficult to understand whether that actually makes an improvement. But certainly, four more putts is four shots.
yeah, well, no kidding. And not to mention the fact that, you know, for most club golfers watching, the 36 putts is kind of doable, and for the elite golfer, something under 30, that's almost half of your strokes are struck with one club in the hand, but people
Yeah.
just don't pay attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people that putt really poorly, it's more than half.
This is the truth. Okay, well, let's dive into it then, shall we? I wanted to talk sort of about lag putting, holding out and stuff, but you came with some really cool concepts and sort of things I want to hit.
Yeah.
So let's kick it off right there and sort of weave the conversation into what we're doing. And the first thing you said to me was there's some subjects, some myths or misconceptions you'd like to talk about, which
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, yes, please, let's do this. And the first one was acceleration, because everyone's heard it. You leave a putt short and your buddy goes, yo, bro, you decelerated.
Yeah.
Whereas you talk about the pendulum stroke. Let's really shed some light on that acceleration thing, please.
Yeah. So I think the general misconceptions, there's probably two. One that, I hear it less often nowadays, I think, but I think we're slowly getting there with the right information. But there's been a long time misconception that we need to accelerate through the ball.
Yeah.
And some people think that's going to be a more stable stroke, is going to be the way they produce their speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other misconception is that the putting stroke is a pendulum.
All right.
And I call that a misconception because there's a lot of stuff within the putting stroke that is kind of pendulum wise, but it's not necessarily actually like a pendulum. And when people think of a pendulum, they think of, oh, the putter's kind of swing itself. If I do it smoothly and let it kind of swing itself down, that's how I'm going to create the speed. But actually, that leads to them not producing enough speed and then therefore accelerating at impact.
Gotcha.
And through using software like Capto, Sam Putt Lab, especially recently, we've been able to measure what the best players do.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the best players, their putting stroke is pendulum wise.
Yes.
But where the ball kind of relays into that stroke can be different from one golfer to another. So some good putters have a slight acceleration at impact. I was hitting some putts the other day with David Howe, who was, on the tour for years, known as a brilliant putter. And he actually has a slight acceleration at impact.
Okay.
But the center of his stroke doesn't have any acceleration, and the center of his stroke's just after impact. Okay. Whereas you might look at someone like a Cantlay, who's got certainly a longer backstroke than follow through. But again, the center of his stroke is before the ball, therefore there's no acceleration there, and he's probably slightly decelerating at impact.
Understood.
So everyone does it differently, but there's certainly some similarities in the fact that they're kind of pendulum wise.
Well, absolutely. And along those lines, I think we will help folks if I'll make a statement, let you collaborate, where, every putting stroke has a phase where the blade is accelerating, then it has a phase where it starts decelerating towards the finish.
Yes.
Organize that in relation to contact with the ball is kind of where you begin to find maybe your sweet spot. Yes.
Yes. I love, that phrase is spot on. Organize it in, relationship to contact with the ball. Well, and everyone does that. Everyone does that differently. What you do notice with the great putters is there's no, crazy sudden acceleration. Mm-hmm. It's generally quite smooth. And I think a lot of people misinterpret smooth for slow.
Yeah.
And those two words are different. Smooth doesn't mean slow. Smooth just means there's no sudden changes in speed. You can go smoothly in your car, but you can still be going fast as you go smoothly.
Exactly.
I think the big thing that a lot of good putters do as well is they're gathering the speed in the backstroke. So there's a decent amount of acceleration in the backstroke. And then they're kind of countering that in the transition. So they actually start applying their acceleration in the backstroke for the downstroke. There's kind of this moment of, for lack of a better word, like lag in the transition, where they're actually applying their acceleration for their downstroke before their backstroke finishes. That really helps them create lots of momentum in their stroke, and they don't have to, have that sudden dash of acceleration near impact.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, I guess it speaks to weight of putter as well. But we're going to talk about putter fitting. I ask you this, and this is sort of philosophical. I'm a big one on ball position. because you've just identified it. Look, with this pendulum wise stroke, to use your term, the ball position, if it's
Hey,
too,
can I, sorry to interrupt there.
yes.
The pendulum Y is actually I stole from Christian Marcotte, so I don't want to
Oh, yeah.
start becoming my phrase, Christian, the inventor of Sam Putt Lab. So I want to make sure that that's clear. Yeah.
Christian, forgive me. But if ball position's off and you're making this stroke that's pendulum wise, if the ball's too far back, you won't have hit the commensurate amount of speed required for the putt upcoming. And if the ball's too far forward, not just will you miss hit likely, you're going to have the blade decelerating unless you manipulate something. So talk
Yeah.
about ball position, and then along those lines, like where the drivers of the speed are. Because a lot of golfers, I don't think they're aware of how they make the speed in the putter head. Are you getting me?
Yeah. God, that's opening a can of worms, I think.
Go
I
for
think
it.
like ball position for me is like I generally don't like back of middle.
All right.
It's going to be somewhere from, putter in the center to further forward,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to depend on a number of factors. For me, that partly angle of attack, um, path, face control, all those things are going to contribute to what's better for that individual's ball position. And again, it's dependent on the individual. But like anything, and I've listened to some of the podcasts you guys have done previously, and um, it's the same thing. It's going out and experimenting and taking information and going, okay, what happens if I put the ball position here or the ball position there, and if I accelerate here and I accelerate there, and kind of messing around. I feel that's kind of forgotten a little bit in golf nowadays.
Well, I would say, and I ask about ball position because I guess it's a hill that I'm prepared to die on right now. Because throughout the
Mhm.
bag, people just think of ball position in terms of how high it's going to launch a golf ball or how
Yeah,
low. Now it's to the putter. It's where the putter is making contact with the ball in terms of speed and path and angle of attack, like you said.
yeah.
So I do want to visit, like, what's the drivers of the stroke? What does James Jankowski like to be like the origin, the genesis of the movement?
Uh, Again, I suppose a little bit of a
That's opening.
opening a can of worms again too, right? Because you look at, again, going back to David Howell the other day, he says that he feels like he's mostly lead side, so his left hand is driving his motion.
That's
I personally would like to feel like it's more right sided. You look at some players, they're more torso driven, shoulder driven. Um, yeah, I think it's again finding what works for that individual.
yeah.
Um,
I want to say this because you say Haller likes to lead with the front side, right-handed golfer with the left hand. So it's more of a pulley sort of action. So
yes,
face may not release as much. Whereas you watch Tiger Woods prior to a round of golf, he's doing putts with his right hand only for about 10 minutes because he likes to sort of sling their head a bit more and almost get that draw feeling. And I
exactly.
guess the common denominator here is for the person, the listener, the viewer to this, is to sort of go, okay, well, I'm going to go and experiment with ball position and how I propel this blade, as opposed to just standing there going, okay, 1, 2, 3, hope, and maybe it goes in and maybe it doesn't. Yes.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you made a nice point there with Tiger with his one-handed right-hand drill. Uh, I think a good way to determine whether you want to be kind of lead side, trail side, or kind of a mixture of both driven is to hit putts. And I believe I kind of stole this one and learned this one from Bruce Rierig.
Okay.
But hit some putts left-handed, hit some putts right-handed, and see which one feels like it gives you more control, and maybe even figure out which one gives you more ability to create, let's say, inertia or speed a little bit more fluidly. And
Mm.
then you can figure out, okay, right, I control the face with this one. I, can control the speed with this one, or it might be both the same one. And that's kind of a nice way to go and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I love that too. I will say this, and this is maybe personal experience from back when I was playing as a teenager. I had a mentor who was a fantastic putter, and I was putting poorly, and he walked onto the green. He goes, "Hit some putts with your left hand only."
Yeah.
I, playing being a right-handed golfer, man, I felt like I could barely make contact with my left hand only,
Yeah.
right? But I battled through this, and I found that as I improved that, it helped me to make better contact because the blade wasn't wobbling all over the show. So I wasn't so right side dominant. So in
Yeah.
a way, it sort of balanced me a little bit more. You got any?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I think there's certain, without going into too much detail, there'll be certain attributes of the setup that will, help a golfer be more trail side dominant versus more lead side, or a bit of both. And perhaps, without knowing too much about your experience, when you were learning to putt more, a little bit better with left hand only, like your setup dictated that you needed to have some kind of left side control in there as well.
I did notice it had an input on my ball position, and just by
Okay.
accident, it moved back. And as it moved back, I began to hit putts more flush too. Because I was that guy that left spear ball short continuously, and everyone was like, "You mental, you're not thinking right, you're not positive enough." But as I moved the ball back and I organized that stuff, the ball came out off the face better, and the next thing I wasn't leaving putts short anymore.
Okay. That's nice. You just made me think of something that I hear a lot, and that's people come into the studio and they say, it's way more common than I think hitting putts too hard, is that they always leave putts short,
Mhm.
and they think it's a mental thing. They think, mentally, I don't want a three putt. I want to, I don't want to hit it too hard, too far past. But actually, it's that the stroke isn't confident enough. So there's not enough speed in the backstroke and speed in the transition, and that's where the putt's being left short, is because they're always playing catch up with their speed, because there's not enough speed being generated in the first place away from the ball.
Got you. Hey, that brings us into the second point. And as you've noticed, I've like way late us over here, but we're getting there eventually.
No, it's great.
You say, and I'm a big one for three putt avoidance for golfers at every skill station in the game. Um, Stroke length dictates speed, and I
Yeah.
couldn't be more on board in the world. So please elaborate a little bit there on the stroke length and the speed of the roll of the
Well,
ball.
I actually did a little research this morning, based upon the three putt chat,
Right.
and I noticed that so far this season, I've got it written down here. There's 104 players on the PGA Tour that haven't three putted from 20 to 25 feet all season, and there's 124 players that haven't three putted from 15 to 20 feet. So
Right.
that those guys inside 25 feet are barely three putting. And that again, talking of low hanging fruit, that's the low hanging fruit for club golfers. If you're inside 25 feet, or if you're 10 to 25 feet, just don't three putt.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the first step, right?
Mhm.
Um, but to your stroke length point, I think a lot of people understand that stroke length dictates, how much speed you produce at the ball, and the further you want to go, the more length that you need. But I like to think of it as stroke speed,
Okay.
because to produce the length of stroke that you want, to produce the speed that you want to impact, you have to produce the speed. So the faster I take it back, the faster it's going to be traveling at impact, and subsequently the longer the stroke's going to be. But I'm not thinking about the length of stroke. I'm thinking about the speed of the stroke, because then that's going to dictate how fast I am at impact and how long the stroke is.
Mm-hmm. Got you. Hey, yes, I love that. I will build on what you say there by I've watched Bryson DeChambeau on a putting green, and he is
Yeah,
surprisingly good from long.
yeah,
Where he actually gets on the putting green with a launch monitor, and he measures stroke and ball speed at contact, which you're so right. I mean, you see golfers with the long range putt and they swing back longer and then they just kind of slow down into the ball, where it's more the speed at which your club's traveling that
yeah,
propel the ball a commensurate distance as opposed to the length of the swing. So that's what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. I think I always look at someone like Bryson and think he's a little bit of a one-off. I don't think many people A, have the capacity, or B, have the time to be able to develop a game like he has.
Mhm.
I would say that most people, you put a ball in their hand and say, right, I want you to underarm throw it a certain distance, and give them a target, and then give them a further target. Naturally, all they would do is swing their arm faster to produce more speed. and the arm will therefore swing longer, but they're not really thinking about, probably they're not thinking about either of those things, right? But naturally they'll move that arm faster, and therefore the arm will swing further and produce more speed when they release the ball. And to me, it's the same thing with the putter.
Incredible. You're absolutely right. I talked with Brooks Koepka about it, and he's like, you put a guy running in front of me with a ball, I'll throw it and hit him on the run every single time.
Yeah.
When I stand and I get all locked up, then the blade doesn't spring as freely, and I end up leaving the thing short. It's a crazy sort of conundrum. And I guess it comes to a place where if I was that guy who came to you for a lesson now, and I'm habitually, leaving long range putts short, is there some sort of a drill you would make me do to feel it? How would you deal with my problem?
Yeah, I think the most basic drill that you can do, and I got called out on this when I was with David Orr,
Uh-huh.
but I think it's still a good drill for a lot of people. Is just simply mark out 3 tees that are the same distance apart. One of them is going to be your stroke start position,
Yeah.
another one's going to be the end of your backstroke, and
Sure.
the other one's going to be the end of your follow through. And just learn to swing the putter fluidly between the outer tees,
All
right?
right.
With the impact being the middle tee, and swing it evenly between those tees and see what that feels like, and just try and reproduce that on the ball,
Mm-hmm.
and do that again and again and again, and try and get every ball that you hit to go the same distance.
All right.
And then, let's do a longer putt. Let's move those tees a little bit further out. Okay, now I have to move it fluidly between those markers. I have to swing it faster, and therefore I'm going to produce more speed at the ball, and then try and get those balls to go together. So it's just kind of a very simple way of trying to get that fluid, I guess, momentum stroke going.
Well, and I love that too, because I watch most club golfers, they get to the putting green, they have maybe a ball, maybe two, and then they just go to a hole. And there's no ever any awareness of the speed at which they're going. They're more reacting to the target as
Yeah.
opposed to actually getting in touch or becoming aware of the speed of which the blade is moving. Are you
Yeah.
where I'm going there?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why when I set up that drill for most people, it's not even to a target. It's just, okay, get a feel for this motion. Okay, a little bit like hitting balls in a net, I suppose, something like that, because the motion itself is more important.
Yeah.
But I guess the result is somewhat important too, because then you're getting feedback. Okay, that felt similar. It went the same distance. That one I felt like I had a little bit of a hit and it went a bit further. So you're kind of like enhancing the senses as well as to the speed and the fluidity of the motion.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move along. I've talked about ball position. I was on my my pedestal a bit.
Yeah.
Talk about eye position at setup. Um, this is also important to me because I feel like the athlete follows the athlete's eyes
Yeah.
with swing path and all sorts of stuff. So talk about what you or elaborate on what you implying there, please.
I think I think there's a lot more better information around setup in general and eye position in setup than there used to be. I think there's far fewer than there was. Coaches saying that you need to get your eyes over the ball, or some would say you need your eyes just inside the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, all you need from your setup is to be able to have the correct perception of the line. So everyone's different. I say probably a high percentage will have their best perception with their eyes over the ball.
Yeah.
But certainly some golfers have their eyes inside the ball. The odd few maybe actually have to have their eyes beyond the ball, outside the ball. Not too often, but sometimes. And then just changing like the orientation of neck tilts and things like that to be able to see the line correctly. And as I'm sure you've seen, like the drill that you can do just to test whether you can see the line correctly is let's say an alignment stick on your target line, and then ball and a mirror often helps, because then you've got understanding of where you are, where your eyes are in relation to the ball, and then just move around. I'd say first of all change that eye position in relation to the ball, and then maybe even mess around with neck tilts. And and try and figure out which gets you seeing the line, let's say, the most easy than other positions.
Well, look, I'll talk about an outlier, and then I'll first say that when I'm at PGA Tour events over weekends, and you've got the leaders out there warming up for the final few rounds, if there were 10 putters on the green, probably 8 of them are using a mirror before they go, just to check. And then an outlier is a Jordan Spieth who, from 4 and 5 feet and in, actually puts better when he looks at the hole. So that's moving eye line and head tilts, because it actually improves the path of his stroke.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Like, again, everyone's different, right? And all these things that you've heard being talked about, like eye position, I feel like is a big one that people talk about, but it's just a small piece, right? Having the correct perception of the line is just a small piece in being able to aim and be able to start your ball on the line. People talk about things like that, like it's the be all and end all. Like get your eyes in the right position, and you're gonna bowl everything. But everyone's different, right?
No, it is, and it's no guarantee. Certainly, I mean, you could get your eyes in the perfect place and not hit good putts.
Yeah.
Don't you kind of feel, or at least this is my inclination, that if you have yourself well organized at address, then you're not necessarily going to have to make one or other mid-swing manipulation to line up contact. Whereas if you're a little wonky, then you've got to make some sort of an adjustment to get the ball in line. Or is that just me?
Yeah. I think I'd agree. Yeah. And again, it's like there's quite a few very good putters that have, let's say, some quirkiness to their setups and strokes, but they have a few different quirky things that kind of cancel each other out and work really well, let's say, in harmony together. And then, I'll get people in here and I say, oh, you're just unfortunate. You have 5 things in your stroke that make you hit it left. Whereas most golfers have like 3 things that make it go left and 3 things that make it go right.
Even numbers of compensations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes that's a hard thing to change, right? Because if they've got some things that compensate, but they compensate well, do we want to change that, or do we just let them carry on, doing what they're doing?
This is a nice pivoting point, because I one time got a lesson from Bobby Locke, who could hold 25-footer over peanut brittle. I mean, the guy was unreal, but every putt he hit was like a little draw. And when he'd set up to it, his left side was high, his head was tilted to the right some. He was sort of almost looking at the hole, and everything promoted this draw path, which got the ball to roll better. So this sort of gets to aiming a little bit too. Talk about that, because the eye line's one thing, but it's also kind of building the stroke and then matching the blade, because Locke had this old style sort of blade putter. Basically looked like a golf club with no loft. So there was massive opening and shutting of the face back and through contact. So why didn't you build aiming and putter fitting into the whole thing to match strokes to paths?
Yeah. So I suppose the first thing to say is, aiming. Everyone thinks with putting, well, I say everyone, a lot of people would think with putting, like you want to aim exactly where you're trying to hit the ball, but actually there's a lot of very good putters that have had biases. The reality is you just want to start the ball on your line, right? So you're effectively you're aiming your action. You're not necessarily aiming the putter square at setup. So there's plenty of very good putters, and I'm sure there's many good club golfers that maybe have the understanding that they have a bias, maybe they don't, but all they do is they're setting that putter down where they need to start the ball on line. And having a bias is okay, as long as it, repeatable and functional is all we're looking for.
Wow. Love that.
And then I suppose the other one would be, I think sometimes there's a misconception that every putt is the same, right? So whether we're going short putt, long putt, left to right, right to left, uphill, downhill, or combinations, like everyone wants to hit that really neutral straight putt. Every putt's a straight putt. And I think actually our strokes can change. And certainly there's been very good, again, like world-class putters where their stroke is different on a left to righter compared to a right to lefter, because all they're doing is adapting to the environment, and doing what they need to do to, best perform that task. And I always use the analogy of, well, if the wind's off the right and the wind's off the left, and you've got 150 yards into the green, are you going to do the same thing? And some people actually they might try and put a pretty neutral swing on it. Some people, will curve the ball in different ways depending on the wind. And again, it goes to that everyone's different, and you're just trying to do the best you can in that environment.
I feel like you've just taken the handcuffs off a number of golfers. And I loved what you were saying there because it jogged my memory and it brought back a conversation with David Toms, who was a fantastic pressure putter.
Mm-hmm.
Toms was like, on left to right putts, I almost feel like I shut the face a bit more through contact to make sure if it misses, it's on the high side. He
Mm-hmm.
goes on the right to lefters, or I got myself mixed up. Yeah, on the right to lefters, I feel like the face stays a bit more open. So I lead the
Mm-hmm.
heel to make sure the ball stays out right. So it gives the thing time to break in. But I think the common denominator here is fitting a putter to what your style of stroke is. So I do want you to talk about that, please.
Oh yeah. Well, one thing to your point there of David Toms, I heard Tiger say when he won his last Masters, he had I think it might have been on 12. He had a left to righter that he'd missed a left to righter earlier, and someone asked him, "Oh, what were you thinking on that, left to right putt under pressure?" And he went, "Oh, I just rotate the face as much for impact as I could, just to feel like it was never going to go right." And you think that's as almost as basic a thing to think under a pressure putt, but
You
it
know,
worked, right?
yeah, well, look, I joke. It was started as a joke. It's now being galvanized, and someone made a meme of me where I'm like, rule number one in golf is a ball will always roll down a hill. And, and now I'm talking your
Yeah,
language, right? Because that's what Woods and Toms were saying, and you would say the same thing. I'm like, make the hole play wider. And
yeah,
if you've got something low leaking speed, that hole's not playing wide. But if it's on the higher edge, on the left to right one, it can topple in various angles of the hole.
yeah, yeah, certainly. And I guess on that, I know we're getting a little bit off tangent, but
That's fine.
back to breaking putts. Like as a preference of mine, people that have a left to right as a right-handed golfer and pull it, I actually quite like that again because it's going up the slope, and vice versa on right to left. If they have a like slight push tendency, it kind of matches with the putt because it's starting it up the slope.
Yeah.
And I feel like you said, there's a bit more margin for error on that high side.
Well, the people would I pointed this out to my daughter the other day who hits it like she's fallen out of heaven, but she's very defensive on the greens. And
Yeah,
she was missing short putts low. They were breaking across the hole all day long. And the greens were fast.
yeah,
And I looked at her and I'm like, Izzy, if you aim this thing higher, you're actually putting up or into the slope for a little while.
yeah,
It might just be tiny, which means you can hit it a little bit harder. But if you get this thing on a fast green low early, it's going down the hill in a hurry. So it almost freed her up and she putted well the next day because she realized, okay, if I'm aiming higher or more on the safe side, I can be more aggressive with speed.
yeah. And there's also the higher that you go, it's quite small margins, but and this increases as the slope increases. But the higher you go, um, the let's say the less the speed is changing as you go higher and higher and higher.
Mhm.
In terms of the speed you need to hold the putt.
Yeah.
So like if you let's say you're going 4 inches outside the hole, 5 inches, 6 inches, the difference in speed between 4 and 5 inches outside the hole is actually greater than 5 and 6 inches. So the higher you go, arguably it is small, but there's a bit of a better margin for you in terms of your speed.
Gotcha. That's cool. But if it's low early, that thing gets to accelerating quick and it's got no chance.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is the perfect point, and I'd sort of kissed it a little bit. Putter fitting, not just
Yeah.
fitting to the stroke style. Well, I guess to the stroke style, but because a lot of folks just pick up a putter, they're like, "Wow, that looks good," and my buddy's using one, so I'm going to try it. But it doesn't necessarily blend with what they're trying to, or maybe even more importantly, can do consistently.
Yeah, I think I've 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 learned a lot about putter fitting, and I've always changed. I say I'm changing my opinion. I've been changing my opinion fairly often, and I feel like I'm finally slowly getting towards where I understand exactly um, what I believe with a fitting.
All right.
Um, and I've learned a lot of stuff from various people. David Orr has been a big influence on this.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to reduce biases somewhat. So if someone, has a big left or right aim bias or big push or pull bias, we try and use various characteristics on the putter to change that. Then I'm trying to torque match to a golfer. So if someone, I think the common belief is that the arc that you have in your stroke dictates the putter type that you should have, whether you should have face balanced or toe hang and how much toe hang.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people confuse arc. So arc to me is how the sweet spot is traveling in the stroke, to keep it simple, and
Yeah.
then rotation is how the face is moving or rotating through the stroke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those two are different things. And then to me, how those two things are interacting and whether they're similar or different will then dictate how much toe hang you might need on your putter. That's just one part of it.
Yeah.
And then to me, you're having to then, okay, right. My theory would be this is your stroke. Let's say you have a little bit more rotation than you do arc. So there's some about the shaft rotation through impact.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, okay, I'm going to give you this putter with a little bit of toe hang. It also helps you with your aim, etc., etc. Let's try it.
Yeah. Right.
To me, that's how you have to do a fitting. You can't just say, "Oh, you have this amount of arc, so you need this putter type. So this list of putters is going to be suitable to you." That's really just not how it works.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love the way you would describe the arc by just referencing how the sweet spot travels through space in relation to the target line.
Yeah.
Just for the layman, because I'm a big one on understanding. Talk about toe hang.
Yeah.
What it actually is, and then how different putters would hang or not as you set them up.
I can use a visual as well if you'd like a
Please
visual
do.
for those
Absolutely.
watching. All right. Let me grab two putters.
So for the audio listeners only, go check this out on YouTube. Just search for Mark Immelman, and what James is doing. He's picked out two putters from a rack behind him.
Yeah, I've got, and if those listening understand the putter, I've got a Newport 2, which is your standard kind of blade, let's say answer shape putter, and then I've got a number 5, which is face balance single bend putter.
Yeah.
So toe hang, when you effectively just balance the putter on the shaft on your hand, the toe hangs down from the heel.
Yeah.
Because the shaft center of mass is, outside of the shaft, and therefore the shaft is pointing more towards the heel. So therefore there's some toe hang there. And then when you do the same with a face balance putter, the center of mass is now pointing at the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the shaft is now pointing at the sweet spot or center of mass, and therefore
It sits horizontal.
face balanced.
Yeah.
So what happens with that is a putter like this wants to have some about the shaft rotation. There's some about the shaft torque, which is this torque throughout the stroke.
Yeah.
And then this one doesn't.
Got you. And then as it pertains to toe hang and not face balanced, there's different amounts of toe hang, because that Newport you had there sort of looked like it was hanging a little, sort of around, I would say 45 degrees, maybe a little less. But I've seen putters where the toe dangles at a 90-degree angle. I'm assuming then, as you explained to folks, that would promote more about the shaft rotation in the face. Yes or yes?
Yeah. So I think different golfers will react differently to toe hang or about the shaft torque, right? Some people actually, because they've got that reference there, all that's doing is to me, it's providing them. I think talk is talked about too much as in a negative way. Like if you've got torque in your putter, that's bad. But
Yeah.
for when you're holding onto a putter, like torque for me is a reference for where that club is in space, right? And the about the shaft torque is a big reference for where the face is in space and somewhat sweet spot. So like me personally, I couldn't putt very well with a face balance putter. Again, even though actually my arc and my face rotation are pretty close matching. If I use a putter with face balance, because I don't have that reference, my tendency is to not really feel where the face is and pull it.
Gotcha.
Whereas when I have toe hang, now I can feel where that club face is in space, and I have a way better feel.
You like you stir my memory because I remember as a young man, I was a decent golfer as a kid, and at that stage, Curtis Strange was at the top of the game, and he won 2 U.S. Opens using a silver ping zing putter.
Yeah.
And I was like, I gotta have one because Curtis uses it. And I remember my dad saved up, and I eventually got this thing, and I took it out to the putting green, and it felt like the toe was whacking around all over the show. And as much as I tried, I just couldn't stomach it. So then, by sheer serendipity, I guess, I stumbled upon a Ping My Day, which was the same shape in the head, but the shaft went in like a gooseneck, so it was a little more face balanced.
Okay. Yeah.
I turned into a star on the green
Yeah. Perfect.
just by finding the proper putter. I kept the same head, just the orientation of the shaft into the head made a world of difference for the stability of the blade to my stroke.
I think that like what you say there like makes sense. I think somewhat people can go like if you have the luxury of going somewhere that has a bunch of different putters, and they'll probably get quite a good feel, excuse me, of what putter is feeling good to their stroke and kind of it's almost like well naturally what I want to do. Does this putter feel like it's complementing that? Does it feel like I have a feel for where that club face is? I can strike it well. And you know, actually, if you're holding a bunch of putts with a putter at for the guys following from the US, like PGA Superstore or somewhere, like it's probably not a bad way of figuring out whether that putter's decent enough for you. So I would certainly say, put my neck out there that doing that is arguably a better way of going to some of these in inverted commas fitters that just say this is your arc and therefore you need this much toe hang.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of cases where golfers have come in with a putter that they've been fitted for, and I'm like, this does not work for your stroke.
It reminds me of something I've heard from a wonderful club designer. And he said, when I make clubs for somebody, I want that club to make them good when they're not at their best.
Yeah.
That's a lesson for club fitting too. Hey, James, this has been tremendous stuff. I felt like my eyes have been opened up. I'm sure our listeners
Thank
and
you.
viewers have too. So then there will be some questions or folks trying to reach out. Where can they find you, my friend?
Yeah, so I have my own website, which is just my initials, JJ, and then putting. So jjputting.com. I do in-person lessons here at Old Fold Manor in the studio. And I do online lessons on various formats. All the information is on the website. And I do a decent amount. I'm trying to get better at YouTube. But I do a decent amount on Instagram, and my handle there is JJ Golf Putting, I believe. So they can find me there.
And that's where I found him, folks. It's good stuff. Go check out JJ. JJ, this is wonderful stuff. What I love about this is not just philosophical, but a lot of action points that people can go and work on too. And I want you to give them the parting shot. Tell these people to go and practice putting, please.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get better, I think the first point of call will be take some of the stuff maybe that you've heard today, almost like give yourself a little bit of freedom, let yourself loose to try a few things, you know, and go figure it out because I think that's the fun part, right?
Yeah.
Messing around, figuring it out, and then you know, you might stumble upon something you're like, hey, that Alleluia moment, that works.
Yeah, we want more of those. Thanks for your time. This was fantastic.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.